Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike, here with Sam. Sam, how you doing?
I am good, sir. Good to be back. We are close.
It's so close.
We are getting very, very close.
We're basically a month until the actual season starts.
I can smell it. I can almost taste the preseason games that will be starting in a couple of weeks. I mentioned on Twitter or X, whatever, the other day too. I am begging the Suns to release more information about their streaming plan. I don't even know if it's going to be available for out-of-state residents like myself.
Yeah.
I could just have League Pass too. That would be fine enough. But I'm begging them for more details. I'm really curious about how that's all going to work out. And preseason starts soon, so hopefully we get it soon.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what the price is for that streaming app, because if it's a good price, I mean, I might do it instead of cable if it's a really good price. There's just really no reason. You just have to figure out how to watch the TNT and ESPN games or something. Figure out a friend that has a login for you or something. Yeah, that part might be a little more complicated. But yeah, it's right around the corner. I can really feel it coming. And there seems to be a little bit of NBA news popping up again. Maybe a Damian Lillard trade sometime soon.
Yeah. Talk to me when it actually happens. We'll cover it. All I'll mention here is that we'll talk about it if we have to. I don't think it's worth speculating for this week. I don't know, maybe on our midweek Patreon episode or whatever. For this week, the main plan is keep up with what we've been doing, which is to continue our external development series. Now, of course, this week, as people have likely noticed by now from the episode title, that means Devin Booker. And might be asking themselves, what the hell? That's not external development, but would you like to explain?
You know what? I'm just going to put the internal development theme song in right here. Now the story about an NBA team that lost everything and the one thing that had no choice but to make them all better. It's internal development. This is funny. Devin Booker is a topic that you and I are not very well versed in talking about, right?
No, it's has happened very few times over the past 5 years for the two of us, I would say.
Maybe just a few people on the planet that have talked more about Devin Booker than you and I at this point, I think. This is a conversation we've had over and over and over again.
And how many human beings have you talked about more than Devin Booker in your lifetime? Probably no one.
Probably
DeAndre
not.
Ayton. DeAndre Ayton is close. I would say it's a 1A, 1B situation, but otherwise I think Book's, he's at the top.
Yeah, he has to be. I mean, I think you could have made a case for even Robert Sarver to be in third place for a while there, because we had to talk about him a lot. But now, forevermore, we no longer have to talk about him. But yeah, Devin Booker is a guy. And the thing is, it's a conversation that has not, at least for me, become boring. Because it changes. It's constantly changing. It's constantly shifting. Who he is as a player has changed. His influence in and out of Phoenix has changed over the years. And then, of course, the team around him and his place within that is changing all the time. And I think, obviously, this year, I think you can make the case it's the biggest change of his career going into this season. And so, to me, to contextualize all of that is still a conversation that is not going to be the same as any other conversation that we've had. Not to mention, the first part of this episode is we talk about who he is as a player, and we just haven't really dug into how good his postseason was that much. Of course, we mentioned it right after the playoffs, but I do think that people are less inclined to listen to episodes about the playoffs right after the playoffs. They're just ready for the offseason.
You don't have to guess about that. We have the objective data to prove it. Our fans, our listeners need some time to mourn at the end of a playoff run, and that's totally understandable.
And the most listened to episodes we've probably done in the offseason have been the ones about trading Chris Paul and DeAndre.
Sure. That's just off-season potting. You just accept that.
Yeah.
It's a rule of the game.
So let's talk about who Devin Booker is. And I think, I don't want to lead you in any direction here. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, no, it's fine that you led us in the direction of the playoffs. Let's start with the playoffs. We already were on board with the notion of him being a superstar, maybe a top 10 player in the NBA, a guy who has led this team in clutch moments for years, who had made the finals run. But I think witnessing a playoff run as spectacular as his 22-23 playoff run, to see him take the reins even from Kevin Durant and truly will the Suns to victory. I went back and watched recently just highlights. I've done it a few times this summer. Just watch highlights of his Game 3 and Game 4 performance in Round 2 against the Nuggets. Yes, that series did not turn out as we wanted, but the sheer perfect basketball that he was playing. I think his Game 3 stat line was 47 points with 2 free throw attempts on 20 of 25 shooting against the Nuggets. Some of the most pure basketball you will ever see, and it all reflects in his overall playoff stat line too. He was sensational. He was the best player in the playoffs this year, certainly better than Jimmy Butler, although I know that was a debate at one point. But yes, he had a much better playoff run than Jimmy Butler, who ran out of steam in the finals. And I mean, I'll just read out the stats here. It's unrealistic to expect him to continue this in any form, but 33.7 points, 4.8 rebounds, 7.2 assists, 1.7 steals, 0.8 blocks, 59% from the field, 51% from 3, 87% for the free throw line. That totals a 69% true shooting percentage, which is out of this world. That's like rim running center, JaVale McGee, DeAndre Jordan levels of efficiency, except he's also the top scorer on the team. He was incredible.
I got the context. I got the context for you here. The only players to average 33 points and 7 assists or more, of course, in the playoffs are Devin Booker, LeBron James, and Michael Jordan. Now, there have been 10 players total to average, and this is in at least 10 games, I want to mention, because Booker played 11. There have been 10 players total who have just averaged 33 points or more in the playoffs. The last 4 players who did it, besides Devin Booker, are LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Michael Jordan. And those are the last 4 players to average 33 points in the playoffs.
Shout out
in
Hakeem.
At least 10 games. Yeah. And now, if you think about that, and you think about just how efficient Devin Booker was, you mentioned it. I think I had 68.6% true shooting percentage. That's what was listed on StatHead.
We round up here. 69. That works.
So 10 players total to even average 33 points or more. There's centers like Hakeem Olajuwon and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as a part of that list. And yet, the most efficient player to average 33 points or more in the history of the NBA per StatHead was Devin Booker last season at 68.6 true shooting percentage. And it was a full 4 percentage points higher in true shooting than the next most efficient, which was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in 1977. It's just insane how good he was in the playoffs. And by the way, it's not new that he's been good in the playoffs. The only downside to all of this, of course, is that it was just 11 games. You know, It would have been nice if the rest of the team was good enough to continue this, but in no way can you look at what Devin Booker did in the playoffs and point any fingers of blame at him in any way. But for his career, he averages 28 points per game in the playoffs. He's played 43 playoff games. If you look at all players who have played 40 or more playoff games, he ranks 6th all time in career points per game as his average. Partially because he started in the playoffs a little later in his career, but throughout the entire time that he's played in the playoffs, he has been great. And I think the biggest change, obviously, in this last playoffs was Kevin Durant and the changes that Kevin Durant brought to this team, and that allowed Devin Booker to have his most efficient and his highest scoring postseason that he's ever had. Just an incredible postseason for him.
KD was obviously there, and I think, we can't underestimate the effect that KD had in terms of his gravity and his spacing on the floor and how that helped Book. But what does build Book's case a little bit more even too is that aside from KD, he wasn't working with much. This year it was really felt the fact that Devin Booker was not working with much on this roster.
Once Chris Paul went down, it was 3-on-5 on offense.
Yeah,
it really was.
If you just go down the line, I mean, Landry Shamet had to play heavy minutes. Landry Shamet sucks, respectfully.
I have a stat for that.
Jock Landale, who I like Jock Landale. I'm glad he got paid in Houston. I will continue to root for him. But the fact that he was put in a position where, due to some effort issues and some other questions surrounding DeAndre Ayton, we had to rely a little bit more heavily on Jock Landale in the playoffs.
He was probably the 4th most important player in the Nuggets series.
And yet still a travesty because is a ground-bound, limited offensive player in terms of what he can do at the rim.
As a backup center,
Right. Josh Okogie, obviously, heavily struggled all throughout the playoffs. I hope he does better this year. I'm continuing to root for him, but Josh Okogie was unimpressive thoroughly throughout the playoffs. I mean, even in the 2 games that we won against Denver, if you go back and you just look at those games, like, not only did Book had to go off, but like TJ Warren was playing minutes in that series and had to make clutch shots just for us to win the games at home.
Yeah.
Just for us to even up the series 2-2. So that just really speaks to the very limited supporting cast he was dealing with, and yet still put up some of these monster stat lines, even as the Nuggets began to trap him, even as they put more superior defenders on him. He was cooking Kentavious Caldwell-Pope all throughout that series. Eventually, they had to switch bigger guys like Aaron Gordon onto him a little bit more. But of course, there wasn't too much they could do because of the KD matchup as well. So just the multiple issues that he posed them all throughout that series. Yeah, he was exceptional.
In 43 playoff games, Devin Booker has 7 40-point games. Just to contrast that, in 147 playoff games, Steph Curry has 8 40-point games or more. This is just a crazy stat for Booker. He's just been that good throughout the time that he's played. In fact, of all the active players in the NBA, Devin Booker has the 3rd most 45-point or more games in the playoffs after LeBron and Durant. And the amount of games that those guys have played are just insanely more. In fact, he's tied.
How many playoff games does LeBron James have in his career? 200?
Hundreds at this point. Yeah, but he's tied with Westbrook for 3rd. Westbrook has also as many 45-point games. But Booker has 73 less playoff games than Westbrook. And he's still tied for 3rd in 45 points or more games in the playoffs. He's just been a spectacular player in the playoffs. You can talk about some failings at the end of every series, but often the entire team is falling apart. And of course, even if you want to really just be frank with it, injuries have been a problem in the playoffs for him at the end of each series. It's one of the reasons I think this team just needs more star power to be able to withstand an injury that lasts a game or two, because to this point, if Devin Booker is bad in a game, the Suns have no chance of winning in the playoffs. They just need him to be otherworldly, especially in this most recent playoffs that we're coming out of. And he's just been really great. I mean, I think he has been basically the best playoff performer the Suns have ever had by a lot of these numbers.
Have ever had. Yeah, I mean, those numbers would indicate a better run than Nash, a better run than Barkley, even though those guys were exceptional in their own right. For anyone who's curious about the numbers, LeBron James, 282 career playoff games played. To give you a reference as to how many games that is, DeAndre Ayton's regular season career up to this point is 300 games. Wow. LeBron is 18 off of that. DeAndre Ayton's been in the NBA for 5 seasons. He's been, as we mention often, in the NBA for the length of this podcast, which feels like a very long time to me.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. LeBron has had a crazy career.
Yeah, it's absurd. Yeah, Devin Booker, though, I think it should be mentioned, though. Obviously, we try to focus on basketball for these internal development, external development podcasts. We try to really hone in on what happens on the court. But it's just, with Devin Booker, you have to mention that he is the franchise at this point. He was drafted 13th overall. And, expectations were not low for him, but not sky high. They were not anywhere near what he's become. He was immediately max extension the first time he was eligible to do it, and the second time he was eligible to do it. The first player in his draft class, in fact, announced in those max extensions in both of those years. And he has become the most important thing about this team, and arguably, I mean, I don't think it's any argument personally, but if you want to make it feel free, the most important athletic figure in the state of Arizona at this point.
You mean that currently?
Currently,
yeah. Okay,
yes.
Just to be clear.
Yep. Currently.
There are definitely still, I think there are figures,
yeah.
And, look, I'm not from Arizona, but
it's
I think
easier to make arguments outside
important.
of that. It's just impossible to make an argument about the current state.
I mean, it's probably Larry, right?
That's the argument that people will make. Yeah.
Who else? I mean, probably, I don't know, Randy Johnson or something.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not a baseball guy.
It's a championship right there. If
I
think you could say Diana Taurasi. We've had this conversation in Discord before.
Right,
you could say Diana Taurasi, but I don't think people just care about the WNBA enough, unfortunately. I think the Suns are the most important team to Arizona, the most important team to Phoenix. And how much weight that carries is dependent on how you feel about the team personally. I think a lot of people, their fandom was revived when Robert Sarver sold the team. I genuinely think that there was just a lot of people really downtrodden about that I've interacted with over the years, and they feel revived by the combination of Matt Ishbia and Devin Booker. And,
Not to mention even more new fans potentially coming into the mix now who were cord cutters or never had cable to begin with that will now be eligible to watch Suns games, including, I mean, I'm really excited for this. I know we've talked about it a bunch this summer already, but just the number of children that I imagine watching a television set with an antenna on it in the year 2023 watching Phoenix Suns basketball games.
Awesome.
Kind of warms my heart, and I think about just the potential, the crazy potential for the fan base to grow.
Yes. And, Monty came here because Devin Booker was here. And he's just a guy that coaches want to coach because he's smart, he's coachable, he plays really hard, and you don't have to worry about whether or not he cares about winning because he clearly does. Chris Paul came here because Devin Booker was here. Kevin Durant came here because Devin Booker was here. Together, they recruited Bradley Beal. And all of this is possible because of what he's done for the franchise over the years. And it's, he's not a super vocal leader, I don't think. But he leads on the court. He plays the right way. He plays hard. He wants to win. And all of those things together have sort of set the culture for what we know of as the Phoenix Suns today. It's all built around who Devin Booker is. And, as Suns fans, obviously, I think we're very lucky to have that. But I think for a lot of people, Suns fans, it's probably easy for them to understand it. But for a lot of people outside of Phoenix, maybe they don't fully grasp that yet. But it is. That is what it is at this point. There's very few teams that have this kind of relationship with their singular star player.
And I think so much of that outside stuff is not even about the basketball on the court, but it's more of a marketing question for Book and the way he's been marketed. We see him now with the signature shoe, and previously with the NBA 2K cover, and we see the marketing, but so much of it is about Book is this chill guy. But it's not necessarily striving to market him as maybe the charismatic figure that some other superstars in the NBA are marketed as. But that's okay, because that's just not who Book is. The important thing is the player he is on the court, the unselfish style of play that he embraces, the team basketball that he exudes, as he would gladly let other teams know in his trash talk. That's who he is, and it's hard not to want to play with a guy like that, as we've seen most recently with KD and Beal.
And back to on the court, you talk about it, trash talk. That's something he does. Now he's probably not marketed as a charismatic figure because he's not trying to be off the court. But man, once he gets between those lines, he's a psycho, man. He's crazy. He'll talk to anyone. He'll push anyone around. He does not care, and he's done it since he was a literal teenager in the NBA. There is a famous quote from Jimmy Butler the first time he played against Devin Booker, talking about how much he's talked trash. We know Kevin Durant talked about it. Embiid has talked about it. And LeBron James talked about the intentional foul that Devin Booker did on LeBron James when he was a teenager and almost took him out as he was going up for a layup, which not a lot of people are willing to do on LeBron James. And it's just, he's kind of a psycho when it comes to what he is and who he is and how he wants to win on the court. And you can draw comparisons as to what it's like in the history of the NBA, but there really hasn't been a lot of guys like that on the Suns until I would say the only guy that kind of matched that kind of energy was Chris Paul. But of course, Chris Paul, because he's small, he does it in a little bit of a different way, I think.
And rubs people the wrong way. Now, granted, look, Booker has a share of haters as well, but Chris Paul does it in a different way than Book. Book sometimes lets his passion get the best of him. And to be honest, I don't think, something I've criticized him for in the past, I don't think he's one of those players who plays best when he's angry. I think he can let emotion run a little bit too hot. In contrast almost to Chris Paul, who I think sometimes will get angry in the fourth quarter and will just say, give me the ball, and at least at his best, turn it on and make 10 mid-range elbow shots in a row. Mm-hmm. But Chris Paul bending the rules of the game and really complaining to the refs and the flopping, and there was a lot of other stuff, kind of ancillary stuff that he did that I think Booker wasn't as much a part of, which earned him maybe his reputation with the Patrick Beverleys of the game and all those other kind of players, those bad actors.
Booker, too. Chris Paul shot those mid-rangers. Devin Booker shoots mid-range shots as well. And if you look at the mid-range stats last season, it was the best season that Book has had from mid-range. He was absurdly efficient throughout the year and then insanely efficient throughout the playoffs. But to be fair, everywhere. He was efficient from everywhere in the playoffs. But 6 players, I've mentioned this stat before in talking about KD, but I want to mention it again in talking about Devin Booker. 6 players shot at least 5 mid-range shots per game. I made you guess who they are last time. I won't make you do that this time. But 6 players shot at least 5 mid-range shots per game in the NBA last season. The most efficient of those players by far was Kevin Durant with an absurd number. 54%, I think it was. The second most efficient was Devin Booker. And Devin Booker's number from mid-range in the regular season was 49.4% from the mid-range, which is crazy, especially for a guy that's 6'5". I mean, he's big, and he jumps high on his jump shots, but it's not like Durant, where there's nobody in the NBA that can block it. It's not even like Mikal Bridges, where the arms are so long that you get lift above everyone outside of that. But 49.4% from mid-range is better than Chris Paul and Landry Shamet shot in the restricted area last season. That's how good Devin Booker was from mid-range last year. And by the way, in the playoffs, it went up to 57.5% in the playoffs for Devin Booker.
He can be bothered by length, just to speak to that difference between him and KD that you're talking about. He really can be bothered by length in a way that KD can't. Which makes
is, by the way, is a great pairing now, right? Because they got to put the length on KD.
Right. I mean, and we've talked about that. Like, how many teams have a second best defender if Book theoretically is going to draw the second best defender? How many teams have a second best defender who's, I don't know, 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan and mobile enough to stay with Book? But his footwork is, if not the best in the NBA, top 5. And he's fully ambidextrous, always has been, able to finish, with both hands for years now. Has such a vast bag of floaters and runners. Like, he has every spot on the floor from the mid-range he can call his own. I thought it was crazy here, his just going through like the points per possession that he got on certain synergy play types, seeing the fact that the off-screen play type, which is typically what you associate with, like, I don't know, tell me if this is not what you think of. But when I think of a player running off screens, I'm thinking of like Klay Thompson off screen.
JJ Redick is the guy,
Redick,
right? Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the typical thing I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
The way Book averaged 1.25 points per possession on this play type last year, that was, I actually don't have it here. I'm fairly certain it was at 95th percentile or above.
It clearly is going to be extremely high.
1.25 is extremely, extremely high. But what makes me laugh about it is the fact that it's just so many of those pin downs and those flare screens and those kind of plays that allow Book to catch right at the elbow and then go to work. And we're just so used to seeing him operate in that exact spot. Whereas you look at some of these other 3-point specialists on the list, some of the other guys who had, in fact, more possessions, off-screen possessions than Book last year from a usage standpoint, and here were their respective efficiencies. Klay Thompson, 0.98. Jason Tatum, 0.98. CJ McCollum, 0.88. Donovan Mitchell, 0.85. Buddy Hield, 0.7. That's dog
crazy.
shit. That's
crazy.
Buddy Hield is one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA, and at least last season, as a high-usage off-screen player, that was dog shit offense. Is what
I think Hield is one of the rare
PPP
players that shoots better off dribble than he does on the catch.
He does.
Somehow. Yeah.
He does, and he's a really unique player, and maybe not fair to compare to. But
you would think he would be great at that stat, even with the percentages.
The way that Book was so good at this stat, operating mainly as a mid-range killer. You know who he reminds me of is like one of his favorite players growing up was Rip Hamilton. He'll talk about there were better shooting guards in the NBA in 2004, 2005, obviously when Devin Booker was growing up. But Rip Hamilton was up there, and the way Rip would used to just run off of floppy action and catch it 20 feet out, never at the 3-point line. It would always be a couple of feet in to the 3-point line and then just go to work and make a mid-range shot. And Book has brought a lot of that flair and flavor, even at a higher level, to the NBA in 2023. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah, when we were talking about Bradley Beal in the episode that kicked off this series, we talked about the difference between him and Devin Booker. And then, I focused a little bit on the pick and rolls, which I will talk about in a second. But you talked about how he takes those off-the-ball screens, catches it at the elbow, and works from there. And Beal doesn't. And, he just doesn't play like that. And part of it is that extra inch and a half or whatever that Devin Booker has on him, height-wise, and just the way they play, where Beal will rely on speed, quick twitch athleticism, herky-jerky moves, and just being a little unpredictable. Devin Booker is methodical in a different way than Bradley Beal. And his ability to rise up and shoot a fadeaway on you from that area, I think, is one of the biggest threats, because from there, he can step back, he can drive, he can, shoot a turnaround, he can turn around and post up, and everything that he wants to do from that area, he can, including just catching and rising up as soon as he catches it, just as he talked about. That 1.2, it's not just from 3, right? He's doing it from everywhere on the court. Wherever he can catch it, he can do it from. One of the best off-ball players in the NBA, in fact, by most of the stats, and one of the best on-ball players in the NBA. That combination of skills is such a rare combination. I think there's only a few players you can even compare it to. The obvious one is Steph Curry, but it's just they're so different. They play so differently that even if you compare them as both being good at both of those things, the results and how it looks is completely different. The one player that you can compare him to in style is probably Kevin Durant. But Kevin Durant's 7 feet tall, so that factor in the difference there as well. He's a pretty unique player for his size, but on pick and rolls, we're talking about how Bradley Beal is so fast. He goes hard on those pick and rolls, tries to attack the rim. His drive numbers are so high. Devin Booker, I think people know it now, But one of the things that constantly caught people off guard is just how physical he is on these plays. In that, if he gets you on the hip, he's going to make it hurt. Right? He's going to push off on you. He's going to bump into you. He'll lean his shoulder into you and step back or step to the side or push off and drive. Or in the post yeah.
too.
Yes, totally physical
really well.
In the post. And, it's more like when you're out of position, he's going to abuse you from that position the way players like Chris Paul did. Instead of just driving right by you, he's going to make it hurt a little bit when you're out of position. And I think that's one of those things about Devin Booker that you kind of got to get used to after watching him for a while. But if you're new to watching him, you just wouldn't expect it. He plays like he's bigger and stronger than he is.
Well, and that's why, something we talked about last week is we should allow based on their strengths. So we talked about how Bradley Beal is so good as a handoff player. That was one of his best play types a couple of weeks ago when we covered that episode. And then with KD, we kind of said, let's clear out a little bit more space on the court. Let KD go to work as a play initiator from the elbow where he's comfortable.
Yeah,
and let
in
Beal,
isolation, yeah.
And he can isolate, but then Beal can work they can do like a give and go handoff between the two of them. And sometimes the defense will follow one guy or sometimes the defense will follow the other guy. Well, you could do the same exact thing with Devin Booker. Yeah, he's not 7 foot like KD is, but he's got strength. And we know how good he is on that spot on the floor. And you can envision easily building a two-man game between him and Beal that looks quite similar. It's going to be Beal taking the handoff and using his speed, or Booker rising up in the mid-range, or using his strength to kind of play a little bit of bully ball to the rim. So there are so many options when these three are all together on the floor that it's just paradise if you're Frank Vogel or Kevin Young trying to drop the offense.
Yeah, I mean, well, when you have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, you have players that can do offensively pretty much everything. There's not really a play type that they grade out low on. And then Bradley Beal has such a massive skill set within that, not quite as versatile. Now that I've dug into the stats, I can say that pretty confidently. But a skill set that is so massive, especially for a quote unquote third best. It feels dismissive to say this, but quote unquote third best offensive player on the team. It's not dismissive. He'd be the best offensive player on most teams in the NBA. But that skill set is so massive. It's just a toolbox that's going to be fascinating to see how they work with it. I watched playoff highlights just as you did. And one of the things I found to be a trend with how Devin Booker played off of Kevin Durant that I thought was something that we're probably going to see a lot more of is, Steven, when we talked about KD on our last episode, talked about how just drawing two to the ball was offense in and of itself. It might not be a play.
Yeah.
It might just be feeding Kevin Durant in the post, and it might not be considered a play, but the amount that Devin Booker can do off of that when they're scrambling is pretty crazy. And one thing Devin Booker did, and I don't know what to call this because it reminded me of almost like a slingshot or an arrow in a quiver that's like pulled back and ready to be fired, is he would stand like 35 feet out when they were feeding the ball to Kevin Durant. And the defense was a little bit unsure of where to stand to guard that, right? Do they play up on him, which they never did, of course, because what's he going to do from 35 feet out? Do they play back or do they play at the three-point line? And often they were caught sort of in the middle where they were a little bit up on the three-point line. And now Devin Booker catches the ball 35 feet out with the defense scrambling because of the double team on KD. And
quick
he can
first
just
step.
Yes, he can just blow by you, right?
Comes.
Or he can just fake it, and then all of a sudden it's a wide open three because the defense is panicked and backpedaling.
And because he's so good, if the defense is in that backpedaling position, who's got a better one dribble pull up than Devin Booker? This is the Eric Gordon spot too, right? We've talked about how Eric Gordon is going to stand that far out.
That kind of spacing, by the way, we've never seen it.
Right,
with both of those guys standing 35 feet out and Kevin Durant with the ball. We've never. I don't. There's the only teams that are similar to that. I think are the Warriors in the past. It's going to be fascinating.
Right. But Book's. I mean, Book's a more versatile offensive player than Eric Gordon to that point.
Of course.
So like, if he's standing out in that position, triple threading and ready to attack a closeout. No, yeah. But it's creating opportunities nonetheless.
And just to talk about that first step, by the way, I think what's so unique about him is that all he really needs to do to turn that into effective offense is not even drive by them, is if he can just take one step beyond them, right, when their feet are planted, now the defender's on his hip, it's over. It's already over. Because if you're not bringing a second guy, he can create enough space to shoot a wide open mid-range shot, which he shot at 57% in the playoffs. So, like, it's just a really unique way to play off of Kevin Durant, and I think it's going to be fascinating. I think I'll call it the slingshot in this coming year because it's just like something already loaded up and ready to be fired as soon as the ball gets to him. And it's really, I don't know, I really enjoyed watching those highlights. And sometimes it's hard for me to watch the highlights immediately after the Suns are eliminated. So it was nice to leave that space in there and be able to enjoy it. By the way, he was so good in that Clippers series. I know it's easy to talk about that Nuggets series, but my God, what did he average in the Clippers series? Like 37 points or something like that?
I can find it for you right now.
He just absolutely killed them, just completely destroyed them. Picked them apart over and over and over again, and played great defense in that series. It's just insane to watch those highlights. And off the ball too, he can cut too. He can relocate right in panic. He can improvise. He can set screens. There's so much he can do off the ball when Kevin Durant has it that it's going to be completely unpredictable to know what he's planning on doing. And that chemistry, as it builds with Kevin Durant, I think is going to be a real fascinating thing to watch.
You were bang on 37 points per game.
Crazy.
60% from the field on 23 shots.
That's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy to average 37 points per game in a series. Even 5 games. I don't care if it's 5 games. That's insane.
Yep.
Any other thoughts on who he is? We could talk about defense if you'd like, or even playmaking.
Well, I think we need to talk about playmaking, but I actually wanted to save the playmaking a little bit for the next section in terms of how it's changing, right? Because I think that's more relevant. So right, I think we can move on at this point. We're about halfway through.
Okay, cool. Let's take a break here, and let's come back. We'll talk about the internal/external development part of this podcast, and then, of course, wrap it up with how confident we are in his improvements. We'll be right back. Okay, so Devin Booker, right? Internal developments. Let's put some more expectations on the man that continues to defy every expectation we put on him. But I think this is probably, since we've done this series, this is probably the biggest change in role that he's had, right? Just because no Chris Paul now. Every other episode there was Chris Paul. Now there's no Chris Paul.
Well, let's see. His role has changed so many times already. I mean, I would say the 18-19, the last time, ironically, that he played, he logged heavy minutes at point guard, was back when the Suns were awful. It was the first season of this podcast, the Igor Kokoshkov season. And then I guess it was a big adjustment the next season after that to transition into more of a traditional role next to Rubio. But this is harder. No doubt this is harder. This is going in the opposite direction.
And this is
back towards a position that he hasn't been playing, even though, maybe it's reductive analysis at all to say who's the point guard, who's the shooting guard.
Well, especially after the playoffs.
Beal's going to handle the ball a bunch. Book's going to handle the ball a bunch. KD's going to handle the ball a bunch. Is any of them really the point guard?
Yeah, it is. I mean, talking about positions in modern basketball has become more complicated and just almost just fuel for arguments. It feels like, but you know what? Tim Duncan did that when he called himself a power forward too. So I guess it's been around for a long time. But Chris Paul went down in the playoffs. We have a good idea of what Devin Booker looks like without Chris Paul on the team just from watching those games alone. But even before that, once KD was on the team, the offense in such a dramatic way shifted to Devin Booker.
Right.
And that was even with Chris Paul. So you're looking at the Clippers series or the first game and a half of the Nuggets series before Chris Paul was injured. It had already happened. It was already happening. So we have a good idea in looking at that 33.7 assists. Of course, we're not going to expect him to average that for a season, especially because he played like 41 and a half minutes per game in the playoffs. But just the feel, the look of what was happening when those two were on the court together, I think gave us a glimpse of what we can expect out of the team this coming year with obviously big dramatic shifts outside of those two guys, right?
For sure. I have another stat here just to point to the changing roles that we've seen over the past few years. The difference between Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Have we talked about box creation on this pod before? Are you familiar with that one? That's a B-Ball index stat.
I think we talked about it in the Beal episode.
Did we? Okay. Yeah.
Because he has good stats there as well.
Actually does ring a bell. So box creation is actually a stat developed by Ben Taylor. Many listeners may know him as the creator of Thinking Basketball. It's a popular YouTube channel.
Yes, go watch the Steve Nash video if you haven't watched it already. It's absolutely incredible.
He did release so like a 30-minute, was it 20 minutes, 30-minute video on
long.
Steve
it's
Nash
so good.
A couple weeks ago. It's good off-season content. Box creation is kind of his answer to how do we... Well, I'm putting words in his mouth here because this is not how he defined it, but essentially, he's more eloquent than I am. How do we respond to... Or how do we classify playmakers in a way that goes beyond just assists per game? Because essentially tackling this problem of, wait, there are all of these players who average 10 or 12 assists per game historically in the NBA, but if they're not respected as scorers, if they're not really bringing that dual presence
if they're
to the
Rondo.
offensive side of the board. Yes, exactly. It's he literally actually mentions this in an article he wrote about it as the Rajon Rondo effect. So I'm glad you brought that name up. Rajon Rondo, Andre Miller, Jason Williams, lots of point guards you've seen before in the NBA. Ish Smith. How much of an effect are you really having on carving out open shots for your teammates if, yes, you can efficiently run an offense, but you are not respected as a scoring threat? And so he was kind of trying to develop a statistic that would include things like usage and more stuff beyond just assists that would holistically approach this question of playmaking and ultimately decide how many open shots you're creating for your teammates. So Devin Booker's box creation this past season, he had a number of 10.7. It ranked in the 98th percentile in the NBA. It was top 20. It was the first season among the 3 seasons that they played together that his box creation was actually higher than Chris Paul's, because Chris Paul's, which back in his heyday, when he was in his prime with the Clippers, he was basically either first or maybe second or third in the statistic every single year when he was a true dual threat, when he was a threat to score or pass anytime he touched the basketball. Over the past 3 seasons, we saw him plummet from being in the top 10 in box creation the season that the Suns went to the finals to falling many spots below that. In the past season. Essentially, we witnessed the Rajon Rondification of Chris Paul, unfortunately, where he just could not have the same presence as an offensive basketball player. Devin Booker responded to that by increasing his playmaking ability every single season. He was always there to pick up the slack, and now for the first time we see him as one of the league leaders in this stat. So just even more evidence that it's going to be tough. This ultimate transition that Booker is making is going to be tough, but he's ready for it. We've seen some statistical evidence of that, I think. And especially him being with another dual scoring threat who poses real gravity, like Bradley Beal, who you mentioned also ranks highly in this box creation stat, and Kevin Durant to boot, I think bodes really well for this team and this offense.
It's going to be especially important. I've mentioned that predicting what this team is going to look like is not, if you're really great at that this season, I think there might be just a little bit of luck involved. Not to call you out there, but anybody listening, but it's just hard to really predict what this team's going to look like with these 3 offensive players. We have a pretty good understanding of what they're good at and a pretty good understanding that they're going to do a lot of what they're good at. But as far as who's going to average the most assists, who's going to play the most off the ball, who's going to play the most on the ball, I think a lot of that's just going to be worked out on the court. But as far as pure playmaking skills right now, I think that Devin Booker is the best of the 3. Now, that may matter like to an extent in the regular season. But every single playoffs we have seen, it has mattered more and more for Devin Booker. So even if it's not something where he's on the ball a ton during the regular season, I have a feeling even if they're all healthy in the playoffs, that role is going to expand even more for him. And it's going to be different because he has to find a way to balance the scoring with the kind of gravity that Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal are going to have, and DeAndre Ayton, with passing and finding guys that are open. And this team, as we've talked about, needs to take more threes. Catch and shoot threes that are open are some of the most effective offensive plays in the NBA. So he has to find that balance. And when we're talking about that development, he's averaged 7 assists in the NBA in the past, or 6.8, I think is what he topped out at. We know he can make those passes, but to find a way to balance it with the players that the Suns have this year, I think is going to be fascinating. I can't wait to watch. I really can't wait. It's going to be fascinating to see how he figures that out, how he works through it, because he learns so quick. He picks up on guys' tendencies so fast, and he's developed so much as a playmaker that looks for not just that first pass, but the second or the third thing that the defense is reacting to find the open guys. That I can't wait to see what he does. It's going to be really fun.
For what it's worth, Cleaning the Glass estimates that Booker played 54 minutes at the point guard position last year, so not very much at all. This is not a big sample size we're dealing with, but they estimate that in that time, the Suns had an offensive rating of 139 points per 100 possessions, which are video game numbers. They're just video game numbers. We need to see it for real this year.
Yeah, so he might have played more minutes in the playoffs as a point guard.
And these are regular season numbers. They're not even playoff numbers.
So even just raw minutes, though, I bet it was more. Right. Because once Chris Paul went down, there was, what was it?
Right, no, that's
3.5
a good point.
games.
I didn't think to look at the playoff numbers. It very well could be more relevant. But, we're in uncharted waters here. The last time Devin Booker had this heavy of a playmaking role, the Suns were an awful basketball team. There was it was the 2018-19 season. They had no shooting. They were regularly playing Josh Jackson and Dragan Bender. There's nothing that we could take, and Marquise Chris and all of those guys. There's nothing that we could possibly take out of a season like that and try and make it relevant 5 seasons later. It's just all different.
I just want to say, I know you know that we say Dragon Bender here. You said Dragan.
Why do I have to say?
I just want to say,
Dragon Bender.
When this podcast started, he was still on the team, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was on the team in 18-19. Well, now
yeah. So we covered Bender on this podcast. Isn't that funny to think about at this point? But let's stay on. I just know people are going to call out how you said Dragon after this podcast releases, and I just want to point out he knows.
Is Dragan wrong?
I don't know.
Is that the wrong way to say it?
I just know that when we did it, when we covered him before, I'm pretty sure we said Dragon Bender. So I don't really know. Somebody's going to go back and listen to one of those old episodes now, and I'm sorry to the person that does.
I'm going to be honest. I really don't remember what the pronunciation guide for that guy's name is.
It'd be funny if we both pronounced his name differently and never noticed. Turnovers. Let's just mention this. We've talked about turnovers in, I think, every single one of these episodes so far. But if we're expecting a higher playmaking load for Devin Booker, the last time he averaged 6.8 assists, like you said, the team was awful, and he was working on not a lot of space when he was driving to the rim. And I think he averaged like 4 turnovers that season. It was a high amount of turnovers, even though his assist numbers were high. Can't do that now. It impacts the defense. It impacts, how tired they are. They're going to play fast, so they don't want to constantly be running up and down the floor because they're catching up with guys due to live ball turnovers. He has to take care of the ball as well as possible. And, he's gotten better. Assist to turnover ratio, I think last season was the best of his career.
The past 2 seasons in particular have been awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. A lot of that credit does go to Chris Paul because of the role that Booker was able to play. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if Book's turnover numbers go up again this season. Just in relation to the role he's going to be playing.
I think they will.
Yeah.
Just because he'll have the ball
will.
more. So just by the ratio of turnovers to dribbles, they will go up a little bit. But so will the assists. I think we can assume that as well. So that combination he just has to keep that assist to turnover ratio low. And when we're talking about internal development, I think that is an important part of it. Do you have more that you want to talk about as far as playmaking?
I don't think so. Do you have anything more on this?
No, I think that was a pretty good conversation.
There's other stuff.
Defense. Let's talk about defense.
Sure.
He has dramatically improved as a defender. And I think in particular in the playoffs it is where he really has shown his improvement. Every single playoffs he's played in, which is 3 now, 43 games, as we've talked about on this podcast multiple times, he has looked like one of the best defenders on the floor for most of those playoffs. And that's pretty impressive for somebody who struggled with that pretty dramatically coming into the league, considering he was a teenager and had a massive offensive role. It's understandable, but he does have shorter arms. You know, he has a good wingspan, but he's not like built as like Mikal Bridges or anything. So it's very effort related for him. Also, I think it's preparedness related for him. But there's no Mikal Bridges now. And the reality is, until the Kevin Durant trade, in the last 5 seasons basically, Mikal Bridges played every single one of those games that Devin Booker played. And I'm not exaggerating, because he never missed a game. Every single game Mikal Bridges played with him. So this defense, you know, this is the everyone does everything conversation that we get to in these episodes. This defense and how good it is, it will rely even more heavily on Devin Booker, I think, than it ever has. So that improvement he has to take into the regular season, and it's going to matter a lot that his effort is pretty high throughout every single game.
Yeah, the effort needs to be sustained. You know, I think we've seen it in waves from Book. It's like when he really does, when the effort is there. I mean, some of the deflections and the chase down blocks he had in the playoffs were just remarkable. But I do think it's not still consistent to the level that we want it to be. Do we need Mikal Bridges, though, now that we have Keita Bates-Diop playing that role, is the question. I mean,
Mikal Bridges is, I think, at this point, I feel like he's underrated as a defender.
Mikal Bridges is definitely a world ahead of Keita Bates-Diop. I mean, we hope.
And Devin Booker. It's just, you know, that's fine. It is what it is. But
Book is going to be burdened by the offensive role to an extent. You hope that he gets to save enough energy for the defensive side of the ball as well. But you also hope that this is where James Jones did his work and some of these offseason transactions really come into play. We know what Josh Okogie can do. Yes, again, I know he was disappointing in the playoffs. But
there's a lot of regular season games still.
There's a lot hanging on this Bates-Diop acquisition, man. I'm talking him up a lot, as are other people, by the way.
I'm less high on him defensively. I think there's a lot of potential there, but I do think that the guys that Keita Bates-Diop is capable of defending and the guys that Devin Booker might be tasked with defending are going to be
different.
Like, there's a chance that Devin Booker's guarding all-star guards on a regular basis this season. Right?
Like he's taking like a Steph assignment or something.
Like he might have to guard Steph. He might have to guard Trae Young. He might have to guard Kyrie Irving for an entire game, for example.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because who's going to guard Kyrie Irving, for example?
I mean,
we'll just throw that out there. Luka Doncic, let's say Keita Bates-Diop is guarding Luka Doncic.
Wait, so who's guarding Kyrie Irving?
So who's guarding Kyrie? It's probably Booker, right?
You could play Jordan Goodwin 30 minutes.
You could play Jordan Goodwin with 30 minutes, but you can't start him because if you're starting Keita Bates-Diop, that's 4 players already plus Keita. That's your starting 5. So that means when the game starts, it's probably either Devin Booker or Bradley Beal.
You could hear me out.
At this point, I think I think Devin Booker's a better defender than Bradley Beal.
The Mavs don't have. They've got garbage in their center rotation anyway. So hear me out. You play Jordan Goodwin to match up against Kyrie. Move KD over to center, and you still start.
You're talking about benching DeAndre Ayton.
You benched DeAndre Ayton for 1 game against the Mavs.
Brace yourself for some bad reviews.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The reality of the conversation and I know I love to have it, and we won't stop, of who guards who, is that this team is also going to switch a lot, and that'll be the case. And it'll be interesting to see how much of this. How much of the way other teams attack the Suns will be about targeting Devin Booker and how much of it will be about getting Devin Booker off of those guys, because he's done a good job when he's matched up one-on-one in isolation with these guys and is a smart team defender as well. Falls asleep a little off the ball. That's still his main issue, I think, because he likes to help. He wants to be in the action a lot. So when he's on the corner guy, he's going to drop. He's going to be the low man, maybe even when he doesn't need to be. But they're going to switch a lot anyway, so he's going to have to guard lots of different positions on every single night. And, if he's the one killing them offensively, they're going to go at him just to try and wear him out. And he's just going to have a bigger role, I think, than he's ever had defensively. Not a huge role. Like, it's not like we're relying on him like he is Mikal Bridges, but he will have a massive role, and I think it's going to be important to see how he responds to that. I think he could have his best best year defensively of his career.
Yeah, and depending on the narrative, could help build his All-NBA or MVP case a little bit. You need the defense. You need the two-way impact ultimately. I think he turned a lot of heads with his defensive performance in the playoffs too, right? It wasn't just the fact that he was averaging 33 and 7. It was the fact
I know
that
Mark
people
Jones
were seeing,
liked it. Yeah.
I don't know what you're referencing.
He just talks about it every time. He calls him a two-way superstar.
Oh, does he? That's great.
Yeah,
See, that's I like that. Shout out to you, Mark Jones.
It's accurate. In the playoffs, at least it's accurate.
Yeah, and I think of the way that a guy like, sorry to bring up Bill Simmons on the spot. I don't know if that's acceptable or not or not anymore. But like the way that a guy like Bill Simmons talks about Devin Booker now versus 4 or 5 years ago when he thought he was an empty calorie loser. He turned a lot of heads. He changed a lot of minds with objective, hard evidence. And
I'm still triggered by that. Yeah,
I know. Well, it was stupid, and so you don't necessarily always let these people off the hook. But you do also need to let them grow a little bit over time.
Some of them don't change. They just wait for every opportunity to say he did bad. Right?
That's true.
True. There's people, I won't mention them by name, but you could picture them.
That's for the Patreon episode this week is going to be that's where airing all of our grievances.
We're gonna give out their home addresses, their phone numbers,
correct,
and social security numbers. But yes, you're right, because to Bill Simmons' credit, he's changed how he's talked about him just flat out. He talks about him as one of the best players in the NBA. You see, this is more of the who is he part of the conversation, but you see a lot of these places are releasing their lists of top 10 players of next season, these predictive lists. Booker's usually in them. Like people are giving him that kind of credit.
That's a big change. That's a big change. Was he in any top 10 lists going into last season? I would
maybe
say
our friend Dan Favali.
I would have to check.
Because he's a genius, obviously. I have a friend who, I won't name his name either, but I have a friend who works at the B-Ball Index, and he thinks that Devin Booker's already better than Kevin Durant. That's what he tells me. So there's people out there, man.
I don't think that's crazy far-fetched. I don't think it's crazy to say. But yeah, coming into last season, I think most people probably would have had him 15. Maybe even top 20. You would have seen some people. I would have disagreed with that, but I think some national analysts probably would have been around there, top 20.
Yeah,
and now he's basically borderline top 10.
We just need him to stay healthy. That's a part of the conversation with all three of these guys, but health is important for him. But I'm going to get to this point that I've made on every podcast so far too. Leadership. We've talked about who he is on the court, and I think so much of his leadership style is show. Like he wants to show what it's like to work hard. He wants to show what it's like to make the right plays, to be in the right place at the right time. And maybe he gets a little frustrated at times, specifically with one large player on the court. But all of these players need to play well this season. They all need to play well in order for them to win a championship. And so his leadership is going to matter. Now that is about how he plays and what he does, a willingness to set screens, a willingness to play off the ball, a willingness to play in a way that might hurt from a play-to-play basis. But it also matters how he talks to these guys, how he lifts them up, how he makes them succeed on every single play. And I think he's become a great leader. I think we've had a leadership conversation about him over the years where maybe I was a little skeptical at first. Not skeptical, but I acknowledged it as something that I thought he needed to improve on. And I think he's gotten better and better and better over the years. And I think this is a particularly important year where Kevin Durant is clearly the sage, the wise old veteran, if you want to call him that the role that Chris Paul was in before.
Well,
but he's not super vocal.
No, he's not
in
at
his
all.
leadership. Kevin Durant,
he's
not that type of guy. He wants to go out there. He wants to play.
I think Beal is going to fill this role more than maybe we even talked about a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's true. You're probably right. So
he's a pretty vocal guy.
But I do think because the way we talked about Booker as the franchise, he sets the tone.
Sure.
And so he needs to do that every single game. And I don't know if you have more to talk about here, but when it comes to confidence, that's the one thing I feel very, very confident in, not to mention everything else. He's a unique player in that I feel pretty confident about all of this.
Well, listen up, Bull. better be on his best behavior. You're talking about his relationship with tall players. I think he should embrace the vocal role more.
Yeah.
That would be nice. I don't think it's his natural inclination to do so. And so
I think it's okay to be mad and frustrated as a leader. That's not, it's not always bad. Sometimes people need to hear that. It's understanding who guys are and what they need is really hard when you're also tasked with doing everything on the court. So I'm not saying it's easy. But like I said, he sets the tone and it all kind of starts at the top. We got Frank Vogel, we got James Jones. We, if we want to go even higher, we got Matt Ishbia giving out free antennas. But on the court, it's Booker, it's KD, it's Bradley Beal. All three of them need to be on the same page. All three of them need to set the tone for the rest of the team.
It's funny because I haven't even really looked into it. Eric Gordon, where do we think he swings on the vocal leadership spectrum?
Not to spoil it, but we're doing an everyone else episode.
That's
next
true.
week.
I guess I'll just have to look more into that, see if anyone said anything about him off the court, like in recent years, because obviously he's a veteran. He's got the experience. He's got deep playoff runs. It would just help. It's hard to be the newcomer into the locker room, though, right? And feel like you're like imposing. You kind of have to have the right. Like I would never be able to do that. Just the type of personality I have. You need to have the right type of personality to just like walk the walk and kind of come in there, even as the new player, and be like, "Yeah, listen up. This is what we're fucking doing." And I don't know if the Suns have a guy like that, but it would be nice if either
Eric
Gordon or Beal helped.
What is this? His like 14th season or something like that?
For Eric Gordon, it's got to be something like that.
He's been in the NBA a really long time. He's also been on a lot of respected teams. Well, one mainly. But I mean, he's a guy who has been a star player and is willing to take the role as a role player. And I think that is a good thing to have when it comes to role players. And I think, he clearly was a leader on that Bohemian team. So I think we can take that for what it's worth. And, I'm looking forward to seeing what he is. But yeah, next week we'll do a little research and we'll try and see what we find when it comes to that. So I think we talked about three main things in the external development part. Assists, playmaking, passing, defense and his role in defense. And then of course the leadership conversation we just had. How do you feel about those three things when it comes to your confidence and his ability to sort of adapt once again?
Leadership is tough because, we just talked about it, but leadership is one of those things that's not as fluid in people. It's kind of just you are who you are. The other two,
I do think that conversation does sort of revolve around DeAndre Ayton too.
Sure. And, who we're not doing an episode on this year, by the way. So,
but I do think there's a lot of history there. With Devin Booker and DeAndre, and that makes it more complicated. That makes it harder. Because I don't know. I think they're both professionals, and I don't think they dislike each other. But I do think they both approach the game differently, and I think that does frustrate both of them to some extent. And you could see it on the floor sometimes, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out this season, assuming it does.
Right. The playmaking and the defense are the other two things that you talked about. I think both of them come down to the same thing: that everyone does everything mentality. That I really just look at Booker and who he is and what he represents as a basketball player. I have full confidence in his ability to continue to grow in both of those areas. And I think it's going to give him a lot of confidence once he sees the rest of this core settle in. I think James Jones did a good job this summer. I think he knocked it out of the park, mostly with these minimum signings. And I think once Book is playing and he's kind of feeling around on the basketball court, the amount of space that he has, and he's slinging cross-court passes and watching some of these guys hit open threes that maybe weren't made baskets last year, or he's watching these guys hustle their tails off. Yuta Watanabe scrapping on the floor for loose balls on defense, or Drew Eubanks setting like really strong screens. Like I think just a lot of these guys are going to play their roles. He has to come in with the right expectations and understand as a leader what each of them is capable of. But I think there's a really strong core here. I think there's a great foundation, and I think he recognizes how important his role is going to be on both ends as well.
Call me a simp if you'd like, but I think we are set up for him to have the greatest season of his career this year. I think we can see it scoring-wise because of the gravity that Kevin Durant has in Bradley Beal. I think we can see it assists wise, because there is no point guard now. He has to be the de facto point guard on many plays. And I also think he can have his best year defensively. I'm confident in all of these things because of the fact that the overall offensive burden will be shared by multiple players instead of just be on his shoulders for the majority of the game. One more player than previously since Chris Paul was here. And that'll allow him to take on a more effective role defensively, not to mention that he clearly takes pride in it now in a way that I think maybe he hadn't in the past. So yeah, in many ways, this podcast is kind of the story of Devin Booker's career. We've covered the majority of his games. We've watched probably all of them this point.
Definitely all of them.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, I haven't missed a single one.
I don't think I have either. If I ever missed him, I just watched him later. I may have missed him live. And so, we're pretty qualified to have this conversation, I guess you could say. And I just feel really confident in what he can be this season. Knock on wood for health. If that happens, especially with maximizing the time that the three of these guys share the court together, it's going to be a remarkable season, a fascinating season, and probably insanely entertaining. If they play as fast as Vogel appears to be threatening that they will, I think it really benefits Devin Booker because that's what they did in the playoffs, and that's what resulted in his insane scoring as well.
I will hold off on giving any exact statistical predictions because for longtime listeners, we're going to do the over-under episode probably at some point in the next few weeks, right, Mike?
Yeah, I'm excited.
So that should be fun.
I got a lot of work to do, but I'm excited.
You do. That's going to be maybe your hardest one yet. You always set really good lines, too. I know Max Macaulay, who always comes on and joins us for those episodes, we always compliment your ability to create really accurate, really good lines. But I will say, Book's gotten close to 30 points per game a couple times now.
Yeah.
He had a career high 27.8 last season. It would be really hard to hit 30.
I don't know, man.
If he just hits that stupid number, it's an arbitrary number, but as soon as you cross the threshold, I feel like your MVP odds, no matter what team you're on, no matter what talent surrounds you, your MVP odds like quintuple.
Yeah.
If you can just hit that threshold. And there's just a couple of things that need to go right. The ball's going to be in his hands more. I think he's going to get much easier 3-point shots when he is shooting off the catch. Do you remember
would you rather have a 30.6 assist season or a 25.9 assist season?
Wait. Repeat those numbers.
30.6 assist or 25.9 assist. I don't know what it's going to be closer to. It's probably not going to be either of those numbers, but it's just a hypothetical.
30 and 6 is like MVP's unanimous. I'm mixing my words. That's Curry's unanimous MVP. That was he averaged like 30 and 6. I'm pretty
25 and 9 is pretty crazy too, especially on a good team.
Yeah. No, that's
I don't know.
crazy.
Just throwing it out there.
That's crazy. So we'll see.
Jokic
I don't know which
numbers.
one it's going to swing more towards. Yeah, except for the built-in 15 free defensive rebounds that give Jokic his MVP every year. I'm just kidding. Jokic is the best player in the NBA right now, but it would take a lot, but he could maybe get there. His free throw percentage, this is a really minor thing that I had in my notes that he could improve.
Yeah.
There was one season where Booker he shot 92% from the free throw line one year. It was the 1920 Ricky Rubio.
It was at the time
season.
Essentially the greatest free throw shooting season in the history of the NBA.
Right. By
volume and percentage.
And before you say that was because of the bubble was only 8 games out of that season. Most of that was not the bubble.
No, he was there already before
the season
bubble.
After, the NBA was still in the process of bringing fans back into arenas. So you could say, his free throw percentage should benefit from the fact that there are fewer fans. His free throw percentage dropped that season. And every other season it's been kind of good, but around 85, 86%.
Is this the Raptor mascot curse? Is that what we're saying?
I don't know. I mean, I would still say 85% is a good free throw percentage. I've always just thought to myself, man, if he could take all the other improvements he's made over the past few seasons and couple it in with another 90+% free throw shooting season.
And he shot a lot of free throws that season. I think it was his career high.
That's like an extra point.
Yeah.
Onto your average, and maybe he hits that 30 mark and wins MVP one of these days. Who knows?
Not to mention the bump in true shooting for all the stats nerds that want to use that.
For sure.
But yeah, I can't wait. to watch Devin Booker this season. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And like we talked about at the top of this one, it's not that far away. It's pretty soon that we're going to be able to watch it. But yes, I'm excited to do this one every year. We did, of course, try to get guests of years past on. He wasn't able to make it on this one, but happy to have this conversation with you, Sam. And yes, we'll be back with some more midweek. Who knows what we're going to talk about? There could be anything.
I think
that
there's
comes up.
A few options.
There is one major thing, yeah, or minor, really, if in the grand scheme of things. But if you'd like to listen to that midweek episode, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/thetimeline. Extra podcast every week for $6 a month, or you can join our Discord for as low as $3 a month. But we appreciate all of you for listening. Back with the final episode of this external development series next week.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.